Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 18-ish of my Fire Emblem 6 hard mode chapter guide. Today we're going to be looking at chapter 15, which is a pretty straightforward chapter. I know I say this about most chapters, but there are a few little kind of kinks with this chapter. It's actually a pretty nice chapter because we're going to be getting a few new units, two of which, specifically one of which, is one of the better characters in the game, so looking forward to that. As far as the chapter itself is concerned, there's a few things to know. Percival, who's one of the characters we're going to be recruiting, is going to come from here. He just hasn't shown up yet. He's a pretty easy recruit, but you have to do it with either your bard or your dancer. So I would highly recommend positioning wise to keep them in the back. Um, the other unit we're going to be recruiting, we get one off spawn, but the other unit we're going to be recruiting is over here. So basically everybody else just needs to come over here. The actual kind of like movement of this chapter, or trajectory I guess, is to go over here, come up here, and then go around here, and then you can go down to the boss. I suppose you can also fly over this, but there's no Delphi shield yet, so it's pretty dangerous. Now, as far as characters we want to be bringing, as I said, you do need the dancer. Obviously, you should be bringing your dancer, your bard on every chapter, but specifically make sure you bring him on this one. We don't need any thieves. The other character that we need is Lilina. If I can find her, I think I'm blind. Ha. For some reason, Lilina, I guess, has affinity for like brigands and berserkers because it's a berserker we're going to be recruiting. Those are the only specifics on units that we need. Other than that, obviously, just bring your stronger units. I will say that this chapter can get a little bit annoying, at least with this initial recruit, because, as I said, you do need your dancer to go up here, and then you need everyone else to go over here. And if Alina's unpromoted, you need to be really careful with her. And her movement is really bad, as a mage, obviously. And you don't have that out of potentially dancing for her, so be really careful with that. Um, as far as the enemies are concerned, right off the bat, this is the first time we're fighting Valkyries, and just be aware these things are pretty tough. They're a little bit like nomads. Nomad troopers will be later on in the game, if you go to Sakai at least, where they have a lot of speed, so they double, relatively consistently, at least on weaker units. But more importantly, they hit pretty hard with 15 magic, and they have really good avoid. And we already talked about how bad the hit rates are in this game. So these Valkyries, they're not as plentiful and as insane as they are in From 7, but the hit rate, the avoid goes a much longer way in this game. So these things can be really hard to hit. So just be aware of that. But yeah, those are basically the preps that you're going to need for this. I'm going to finish off my preps, and then we'll talk a little bit about the chapter when we start it. Okay, so one of the other things that I actually haven't mentioned yet is anything about stat boosters, like talismans and things like that. You do get stat boosters throughout the game. I don't think it's like super important to be giving them to specific units, except for one that's really important. I think talismans work really well on Milady because basically the only way she's gonna die is through resistance. My Rucker is pretty strength screwed, so I'm gonna give him the energy ring. I believe I have a dragon shield on Luke, because obviously he's pretty frail. But you can just kind of distribute these however you want. In an ideal world, you might be giving them like all the lance or all the military or something like that, but you can just kind of decide you can give them. The big one though is the boots. Now there's a few different options for the boots. I really like giving it to the dancer because they only have 5 movement, and basically if dancers have more movement, it gives everybody else more movement, which I think is really useful. You can also give them to Roy. That's usually if you're, I'd say only really give it to Roy if you're trying to like speedrun and stuff, because honestly, the only reason to give it to Roy is you can complete chapters faster, so I don't think that's great, but you certainly can do that. The other option is Milady, which I also think is a decent option. She already has 8 movement, so it's not like super important, but I think Boots Milady can, dominate the game. Non-Boots Milady can dominate the game, whatever you want to do. But I would recommend the dancer because I think if you give it to the dancer, you kind of give it to everybody in a way. That's just what I like, but you can kind of decide what you want to do. So we also get a new unit here in Agreen. We're going to get 3 new units on this chapter. This is the only one to get from the start. Now, Agreen is, as you can see, a level 1 sniper. Agreen's quite a good unit. She's basically just a stronger version of Klein. Although, actually, unfortunately, she only has B in bows. So even though her stats are a bit higher, she can't use a silver bow where Klein can. It's not really that big of a deal, but it is sort of unfortunate. You can potentially get her to A if you use her a bunch. But yeah, just be aware of that. I mentioned a couple of times that I think snipers are really good in this game. Not archers, but pre-promote snipers. Both Klein and Agreen are basically good for the entirety of the game. This also goes for like Dion, who's the nomad trooper you're going to be getting, because bows, and especially really strong bows, can just hit wyverns in the end game really, really hard no matter what, and that's just a really useful thing to have. A green has good enough stats to kind of tempo through this portion of the game. You know, her speed's good enough to double at least the slower enemies. She hits pretty hard. You know, she has a killer bow. And then in that sort of end game scenario, she can be extremely useful with Klein, um, specifically on the Murdoch chapter, with the ability to hit wyverns really hard. So a green's quite a good unit. I wouldn't necessarily recommend training her, I guess, but she absolutely can be in your lineup and be quite helpful. So the other unit we're going to be recruiting but haven't yet is Percival. Now I mentioned that this recruit is pretty straightforward, and it is. All you're really going to need to do, you can check the ranges of the calves here, is put your Dancer just outside of range, so right here, and I'll use the boots. And this will get you a pretty easy turn to recruit. The other thing that I want to mention with Percival is this Wyvern right here. Now at the moment he's not really doing anything, but when you recruit Percival, these Cavaliers will become green units, and if you keep them alive throughout the entire chapter, you get a Knight's Crest. And Knight's Crests are really useful at this point. We're going to be getting another one in the next chapter, but we really want one because obviously our Allen's been capped at 20 for a long time. So this Wyvern can absolutely be a problem, because once you recruit Percival, this Wyvern will be in range of some of the calves. And so they don't handle Silverlance Wyverns particularly well. So I would highly recommend having Milady or somebody go over here. I'm going to use the Talisman here and just bait out this Wyvern for turn 2 to keep them alive. Basically, the sort of trajectory of the calves is they're going to come down here, and they're going to go over here and then escape right here. By the time they get there, you're probably going to have this all cleared up, so it's not an issue. So the Wyvern is basically the only thing that you have to deal with that's potentially preventing you from getting the Knight's Crest. So just be aware of that. Other than that, as I said, just move to the right. All of these units are going to be moving down toward you. So the big thing is to deal with this first group of units here, and then deal with the second group. The Berserker that we're going to be recruiting hasn't shown up yet, but he'll show up in a little bit here. So yeah, just do that. Okay, and as you can see, basically Percival will wind up here. I believe he does this every single time, and you can pretty easy recruit him. Whether you have the boots or not, it doesn't matter. And you can do this with Lalum or Elfin. Obviously we have Elfin, but Lalum works just the same. So let's talk about Percival. Now, Percival is one of the, like, 4-ish best units in the entire game, and you can immediately see why. His stats are absolutely insane. Percival in normal mode is pretty strong, but he does get hard mode bonuses, which is a big reason why he's so insane. Yeah, there's honestly not much to talk about with him. You know, 20 strength, 20 speed, it's a lot. 15 defense, base 51 health. You know, his growths aren't the best, but as long as he gets a little bit of strength and a little bit of speed, he's going to double and hit really hard throughout the entire game. Highly recommend using him. Highly recommend deploying him all the time. You know, eventually your calves are pretty likely to surpass him, but honestly not by much. He's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, again, not much to talk about with Percival. He's insane. Yeah. Okay, so this is the point in the chapter where things can get a little bit difficult, because you have a bunch of these mercenaries and the sniper, along with 2 longbow guys, which aren't particularly scary, coming at you. Now, these mercenaries are pretty scary. I believe one has a killing edge. One is an armor slayer, which shouldn't be that big of a deal. But yeah, this can be pretty scary. If you can get a guy in this fort, it can be really nice, because you can deal some chip damage here and kind of make this sniper go in the corner. But yeah, just be aware that this can be kind of difficult. The unit that we're going to be recruiting, who's Garrett, did just spawn. So sorry. You have a handful of turns before he gets to this village. That's where he's going to sort of go to recruit with Lilina. The item in this village, I believe, is Hammern, which is the staff that can completely bring back all the uses of an item. So it's a very useful thing. So if you could save that village and recruit Garrett, or potentially kill him if you need to, but hopefully recruit him, it can be really useful. But yeah, just being able to handle these mercenaries. This is actually a pretty common thing, pretty common like skill, I would say, in most Fire Emblem games. It's like how to handle situations like this. Now, a question that you're going to ask yourself in a lot of these situations is, do I see if I can just kill enough and sort of wall off enough enemies to go forward, or do I back up, let the enemies come to me, and then deal with them on my next turn? And in this situation, I think we're going to be fine to do the former, but sometimes you just have to kind of take your chances and retreat a little bit. But yeah, it's up to you. But dealing with these very quickly is really useful to getting this recruit. Okay, so I've talked about this before. Sometimes these enemies just like don't move. I think they all have like a 50-50 chance, or maybe it's a little higher than that. So just be aware of that. It's not a big deal in this situation because these bandits are not going to become green units, and we have to keep them alive or anything. But yeah, hypothetically, this is the positioning that you want to lean in to get the recruit. We're going to have to do it a little bit differently, probably next turn. But yeah, just be aware that if you did decide to move, that would be the way to go. And you can see the calves are as long as you do this in a relatively timely fashion, the calves will just be behind you, and they can escape pretty easily. It's actually pretty rare. I'm not sure I've ever seen Garrett not move once, but he actually didn't move 2 turns in a row, which is kind of funny, but not that big a deal. Just get the recruit with Alina here, and then we can talk about Garrett. So the other 2 units I've talked about in this chapter were pretty amazing. Garrett is unfortunately kind of the opposite. He's not a terrible unit. He does have 54 health and 21 attack, which is pretty nice, but his speed is really low, and his defense and resistance are also quite low. Unfortunately, he also has the displeasure of being forced into using axes. He does have 16 skill, which is kind of nice. Garrett is a really nice tempo unit, and when I say tempo unit, usually what I mean is he's pretty good from this chapter through the next handful of chapters, but will definitely have sort of fallen off in the end game. Although even in the end game, a lot of the wyverns are pretty slow, so he can still do some work. But yeah, Garrett's just a really nice unit, sort of like a green, to just kind of have around for his ability to hit pretty hard and take hits pretty well. But he won't have the end game potential of a character like a green. So yeah, not a bad unit, but not a great one either. Okay, so at this stage of the chapter, there's not a ton left. I did skip a little bit. You just kind of handle the Valkyrie and the calves that are here, and then there's some wyverns that were up here. These reinforcements, I don't know exactly which turn they spawn on, but if you're doing this quickly enough, you can pretty easily get here before they spawn. I would probably recommend getting people onto these forts. The nice thing is that this sniper will move whether he's in somebody's range or not, so we should be able to pick him up with humility. The last thing before the boss is that I believe 2 calves will consistently spawn down here as reinforcements. Now, they're not like paladins or anything like that, so it's not particularly difficult. But yeah, this is the last little bit of the chapter. Again, if you can get here fast enough, I would recommend getting in these forts. And then the calves that spawn, it can be a little bit annoying to kill the boss through the calves because they just keep spawning in enemy phase. So you may want to wait them out, but yeah. Okay, so the last thing we have to deal with is the boss. He's not particularly difficult. He has 9 speed, which is actually quite low. He just has a spear and 19 strength, and he's fairly bulky, but honestly, there's not much to worry about in regards to him. As you can see, our Milady deals with him pretty decently, so yeah, not a ton to talk about with the boss. You can use pretty much whoever you want. Okay, so like I said, 2 calves will spawn and keep coming out of here. It just depends on how fast you do this. Um, They'll stop spawning if you kill the boss, so I didn't actually wait out the reinforcements, I just killed the boss. So just be aware of that if you are able to kill the boss. And yeah, that's this chapter. It's, as I said, not too difficult. There's basically different like waves of reinforcements, and the positioning of the couple of units that you need to recruit enemies with is extremely important. And then as you can see, we do get the second Knight's Crest, which is really useful. As I said, we are going to be getting a Knight's Crest, I believe, and being able to buy Knight's Crest on this next chapter. But this is sort of the second Knight's Crest, so you get to promote Alan if you promoted Lance, or vice versa, which is extremely nice. But yeah, a pretty straightforward chapter. Um, so yeah, as always, I hope everybody enjoyed, and I will see you next time.